So my name is Brady Walkinshaw, and I have the pleasure of being the CEO of GRIST. And for those of you who don't know what GRIST is, we're a national environmental media publication based here in Seattle with our team scattered around the country. We're journalists, we're editors, we're video producers. We're people who are bringing people together in physical spaces to talk about a better planet. And our vision at GRIST is we're working for a planet that doesn't burn and a future that doesn't suck. So with that in mind, we couldn't think of a better partner and be more honored to be working with Amplifier. Art and culture, and specifically art, we believe, plays a vital role in helping us all imagine what's possible, helping us scale that change, and helping us kind of shift the vision of what a better future can truly be. So in that spirit, I am delighted to be here with these three distinguished Jackson and past Jackson fellows in thinking about what Scoop Jackson meant for the Northwest and the planetary impact that he had. So with that in mind, I thought that I would start, and one thing before I launch in, Tamara, who's in the back, we're going to talk for maybe 30, 40 minutes. And if you have questions in the audience, you can just hand them to Tamara, who's in the back, and she'll bring them up to me, and we will take them from there. So part of the theme of this evening is talking about environmental heroes and thinking about what our climate heroes mean to us, who they are. And I thought that I would just start perhaps at the far end and maybe just talk a bit about a hero that you have in your life and how that perhaps has factored into your thinking around action around climate change.
Absolutely. So my name is Alex Adams. And I have two heroes, and they're truly my heroes. So they're not, if you look at the pictures out there, those are people who have made profound changes in our world, really. My two heroes are personal to me, and they represent two different phases in my understanding of climate change, I would say. So the first one is a guy named J.B. Smith. And I worked with J.B. Smith when I was working on tall ships, as Laura said. So I used to sail around with a bunch of high school and college students, and we spent a lot of time in the natural environment. Sorry, it's loud where I am. So I spent a lot of time in the natural environment. And when I started learning about climate change, and that was honestly way too late in my life, I think I was maybe 20, if you can believe that, I thought about it in a very linear scientific way. I thought about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I thought about impacts to our natural environment. And I thought that that was the main reason why we needed to take action. However, now I have a different hero, and my hero is a woman that I work with. And she's been a tireless advocate for me and has taught me so much about how I can, as a professional, make a difference and push hard in the government, which is not always an easy place to make progress. So, and she also taught me that the issues that we're facing are certainly in the natural environment, but the things that really matter to us are definitely in the social environment, providing the services that are needed by people who don't currently have them. How do we do that? How do we ensure that as our climate changes, we're looking out for everyone? And that is, I think, the next phase of my understanding of how at least the government is addressing climate change, is providing services across the board and thinking about everyone, not just reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
That's great. You want to pick it up?
Yeah, I can. So I'm Matthew Koma. I'm the Program and Operations Director for the Seattle 2030 District. And so
maybe share what that is, too, folks.
Yeah, I can do that. So we're a non-profit organization, and we're based here in Seattle. We actually work in the Impact Hub as well. And we work with building owners and managers to work towards a goal of a 50% reduction in energy, water, and transportation emissions by the year 2030. So if we achieve that as a district, it will put us on a path to climate stabilization, and then we can work towards carbon neutrality and kind of fix the environment through buildings. And that kind of actually links into my first climate hero. So Brian Geller was the founding executive director of the 2030 District. He took an idea of the Architecture 2030 Challenge for Planning, which was really aimed at architects. He was an architect, and just looking at how architects can impact the built environment. I think Amarpreet probably knows a lot about this as well. And he wanted to take that idea of applying that building by building and see if you could do that on a district scale. So we launched in September of 2011, and it's now in, I think, 20 cities across North America. So really kind of snowballed way quicker than anyone thought it could happen. And just the fact that he had the kind of foresight and wanted to make an impact that way kind of spoke to me. He also gave me a job when I first moved here, so he helped me kind of get to where I am today. So I have a lot to be thankful for on that. The other people on my list, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but when I started doing this, I really started to realize that my list of climate heroes was overwhelmingly white, and a lot of white guys as well. And I probably got like 5 people down the list before I was like, man, this is kind of the sad state of affairs, I guess. So I had to start thinking, I'm like, I know I have like strong women that have done a lot like in the Seattle community. So there are definitely a few. The local one that I really want to talk about is Patti Southard. And the Southard sisters, they're twins, Patti and Alan. And Patti works for King County, and she's really doing a lot for the Sustainable Cities Initiative, working with 39 cities across King County to push building efficiency and kind of take the leadership principles from other cities and applying them to others so everyone can learn from each other. And just kind of a tireless advocate on that. It's kind of, she's also an awesome person if you ever get to meet her. She gives great hugs, which is always a bonus to me. So, yeah.
That's great. Do you want to go next?
Before I start, I want to thank Matthew. 2030 District is doing a lot of great work here in Seattle, and it really ties into what I do for a living, so thanks, Matt. I'm Amarpreet Sethi. I work for an architecture and engineering company, DLR Group. We've got a K-12 studio, Justice Civic, and Workplace studio. So there's a lot of different building types that we work on. And as I was thinking about it, I kind of, same as Matt, there's just a long list, but I think it really goes back to the professor who really opened my eyes to buildings and energy efficiency and health and wellness is really the person that I think of, because before that, it had never occurred to me why in my own home I constantly had a cold, but if I was outside, I was happy and I could breathe really well. It was just because the air in my house was not good enough. Why? Because it was air conditioning all the time and there was no fresh air coming in. So just nitty-gritty things like that is what I do for a living. It's about, as Lara mentioned, it's really about healthy buildings. We get healthy buildings when we're climate conscious and when we do sustainable design. And the professor that taught me this, and the reason I think of him is because he is so patient in teaching us something that we had no clue about, and now this is what we're constantly teaching, not just mentees and things like that, but the owners of buildings, so that they can sort of bring this to the people who are in their buildings. And the other big list is my colleagues. I cannot stop wondering how they allow me to meet with their clients and go on and try to change their mind and push them to do things that sometimes they're very reluctant to do. It just amazes me that I'm allowed to do that for a living and actually get paid for it. So they're definitely my heroes because they clearly believe in this, and that's what allows me to do what I do, because otherwise I'm often disappointed and discouraged almost every day because not everyone is hearing what I have to say and agrees with it.
Yeah, that's great. One of my, hearing you speak, one of my climate heroes, which is, I was thinking of kind of two, and one is a more personal one. I'll save the other one for later. One is my husband, who's a marine biologist, studies ocean acidification. And I was thinking about the paintings here, and for our wedding, and this kind of manifests how we think about climate and how we think about the environment manifests every day in our lives. And one of the things that we did when we got married a couple years ago, the night before our wedding, went and harvested some seagrass out in Puget Sound. And then we had, instead of flowers, we had vases with salt water and seagrass, so we could teach about ocean acidification at our wedding, which was it worked well. Everyone left knowing what ocean acidification was. So that was mission accomplished. But I think that it kind of leads me to the next question that I was going to ask you all, which is that it's been kind of a crazy year. I mean, if you look at the past year, and if you look at places where hope has come from, and when you think about the context of our sitting here and talking about art and the environment, it has made me think that maybe what we think about has changed in terms of environmental leaders and what we need today. And I was just curious if how you've thought about climate leadership, how you've thought about climate heroes, has changed at all in the context of perhaps this, in many ways, depressing, but in some ways, I think there's been a lot of optimism and hope and solutions that have also come out of this past year. So I was just curious about your thinking about the past year, and maybe we'll start in the middle this time.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this earlier, and I was really debating whether I should be like, I'm a super sarcastic person, I'm British. So when you asked who climate heroes were, I was gonna say like, hey, Donald Trump, and just see what the reaction was. But I think honestly, just because of the crazy year that it's been, it has meant that he's kind of mobilized the environmental movement a lot, and it's made people think, okay, the federal government probably isn't going to do this. How do we make a difference ourselves? So there are a lot of local leaders, I think, that are kind of stepping up to the plate. The Governor Jay Inslee is probably a great example of that, who was one of the first people to step up when Trump said they were coming out of the Paris Climate Accord to say, okay, how are we going to do this in Washington State? Who are the other states that we can partner with that are also interested in doing that? So I think as bad as the year has been, and every day seems like a year, there have been some positives that have come out of it for that reason.
I kind of want to ask the audience a question. So as it relates to climate change and the situation that we're in, I'd like to see a show of hands for who here, and be serious about this, who here is optimistic? All right, well, let's see. Who is not optimistic? All right, so...
Who's ambivalent about the whole thing?
Yeah, who's ambivalent? I'd say two-thirds are optimistic. So we were talking about this earlier, but I am prepared to be surprised. I'll say that. I am very, very concerned about the state of affairs in our nation for a variety of reasons, many, including, of course, the changes that have happened regarding our environmental protections and our efforts to confront climate change and be climate change leaders as a nation. But I haven't been around on this planet long enough to see that things can change really quickly. I've heard that they can, but I haven't seen it. And so I'm kind of holding out. I'm reserving my own judgment because I think that in the next 20 years, your careers, my career, that is really the time when we need to step up and take some very ambitious action to do something big. And so I think that we will be able to do some profound things in the next several years. And I think that's almost attributed to the fact that what we're seeing at the federal level has really galvanized action at the local level. And I think I'm enthusiastic about that.
So just to follow through that, I mean, the next step I think is, certainly the people just taking it in their hands is one thing, and then I think there's a direct link with the economy now, and the people are starting to see that, well, this is actually going to help the economy, so they're not stepping back. They're just moving forward. They're not quite sort of saying, well, yeah, no, climate change is not real. They're just saying, well, we're not doing it for climate. We're doing it, it makes economic sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the focus needs to be anyway. I mean, you do the right thing, you move in the right direction. We don't always have to talk about doing good and that kind of stuff. It just starts to make sense.
Yeah, I was just, I had the chance to spend the last few days in Jackson, Mississippi, which is a place I'd never been before. And it was a gathering of climate and labor and justice leaders talking about kind of this very question about kind of in many ways were they hopeful. And the kind of the theme of the gathering was this idea of kind of having a living wage for a living planet. And there, I left it very hopeful, and I think there was a lot of conversation about the administration. And one theme that I heard throughout, I mean, it's hard not to see it and feel very badly, but many people felt that it had been very clarifying in terms of movements coming together, finding more unity, which I think I certainly feel in some ways. So the next question I was going to ask is kind of in the context of being in this space with art and culture and thinking about the work that you have that is in many ways quite technical in different aspects. Kind of curious to hear a bit about how you see the power of art and kind of storytelling in the way that Amplifier has been doing, playing a role in your work. And before you launch in, one quote that I'm reminded of that I'd like to share was from John F. Kennedy, which is especially true in these times, but is this quote that he said, if politicians knew more poets, and if poets knew more politicians, this world would surely be a better place in which to live, which definitely rings true, and I don't know how many poets our president knows. So I'm going to hand that off.
Definitely not a poet.
Definitely not. So maybe talk a little bit about in your work how you see storytelling and visuals and heroes in that way. You want to start?
I mean, it's such a big part, right? I mean, in architecture, it's just the way you communicate. If you have to explain something, you've failed anyway. So I mean, for us, especially as it ties to the work that I do and making buildings efficient and attracting people to use the building in a way that it's going to be more efficient in the way it operates, or just in the way that somebody might open a window so that they get fresh air in rather than switch on that AC and that kind of stuff. It's making sure that the design is art itself and attracts a person and allows them to feel in a certain way and makes them want to behave in a certain way. So that's part of our challenge, and we constantly try to incorporate that in our designs. And to your question about storytelling, I think for us, me personally, that's one of the ways in which we have our owners want the things that I think they should ask for and agree to and spend more money on. It's how you form that and form that sort of, tell that story of why they should do X, Y, or Z, right? Even, I mean, there's one thing that I'm constantly fighting for, which is shocking to me that I'm actually fighting for this, is making sure that schools have operable windows. Like, are we, we're not making jails here, but you'd be surprised how difficult that has become. It's like, why would you want operable windows? It doesn't make sense. And to me, it's the other way around. So it's storytelling is what makes me sell that to the owner and make them change their mind, where a simple thing like an operable window goes into their schools just because of that, the way they heard that story of how that's going to impact a child.
Yeah, the poet thing I think is great. I think honestly the non-profit and the environmental non-profit could probably do with better poets, because we're really bad at storytelling, I think. We're great if you put us in a room with other like-minded people who get it, everyone understands, but if you just put us in a room with the average person, it takes a lot longer to tell that story. And then, like Amapri said, if you have to spend ages, then you've kind of failed already. So I think the importance of storytelling is huge. I mean, even as a district, we're still trying to figure it out. We're like 6 years old, and we're still trying to figure out how to tell our story better so that the public gets it. I think time is a huge one as well. I kind of tangentially, I was lucky enough to do the Al Gore's climate reality leadership, and I think he even realized the average person doesn't have 2 hours to sit through a presentation about like why climate change is such a big deal and the impacts of it.
Except for these people.
Except for these, like I guess there's alcohol here, so that kind of keeps people around, I think. So he actually made a 10-minute presentation that was like the truth in 10. You can actually go and download it, and it gives you pretty much the bullet points, but it's still an impactful message to be like, oh crap, we're in a serious place right now, and if we don't start changing and people don't start telling the story better, then we're kind of screwed. That was a really negative note to end on. I'll hand that to Alex. Now you can make it positive.
Well, like nonprofits, the government isn't much better at poetry either.
Yeah, they're so good at it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome at poetry. I spent a lot of my time trying to convince people that climate change is important, they should fund it or invest in it or think about it or do something about it. And specifically, Amplifier. I gotta say, Amplifier is doing a terrific job, but art and the work that Amplifier is doing is really changing the frame that we're communicating in. So when you look at art, you don't think it's not necessarily a linear piece of communication. It could change the conversation. It could start you at a different point in the conversation. And I can't say that I talk about art too much in my job. I wish I did. That would make my job far more interesting. But I think about it every day. As I walk to my job, which is right down the street, I walk past Amplifier. I look at the machine gun going through the meat grinder, and it just, I feel like, puts me in a different frame of mind, and I really do my darndest to think in ways, or let me rephrase that, to communicate in ways that get people moving in a different way, because the same old jargon, the same old stuff doesn't have that big of an impact anymore. And so at this point, you have to be pretty creative. And I think using art as a medium to communicate some of the big issues that we're facing is brilliant and absolutely essential.
So we're going to go to the audience for an audience question. I will start with you, Alex. So what do you see as the biggest misconception of the climate movement?
That it's about polar bears. It's not about polar bears. It isn't. I mean, it's a little bit about polar bears. Polar bears are in trouble. But it's really about our kids. It's about the next generation. It's about leaving this planet better than we found it. And we are not on track to doing that. So we have to really change the frame of how climate change is being considered. I gotta say, I watched Planet Earth, and I loved it. It is amazing. It's an amazing way to communicate the challenges that we're facing, but it doesn't really touch on the people issue. We need something like Planet Earth, but that really connects with the social side of the issues that we're facing. Because bad news, we're not winning this fight right now. And pretty soon, we're going to have to adapt to a very different world. And we'll be able to do that at varying levels of competency. People who are really well off can go buy more water, can buy themselves a different climate. People who are not don't really have that many options. So the future is going to look a lot different, and it doesn't really, in our lives, involve polar bears. So I would say that's the misconception.
I think the biggest misconception, or the biggest mistake that the climate movement made, the biggest term mistake, is global warming, I think. I think if we'd have phrased it as climate change from the outset, we might have been a little bit different. But the fact that politicians still go into the Senate with a snowball and they're like, global warming is not a thing. Look, there's 6 foot of snow outside. It's like, yeah, but should there be 6 foot of snow outside at this time of year? And I don't know how, we're so far down the line on that now. It's such a challenge to overcome that. But kind of going back to the optimistic side, I'm a hugely optimistic person. Probably too optimistic for the world that I'm in, especially working with building owners and developers. But I think the fact that we have so many young leaders coming through this, I'm lucky enough that I've got to interview the latest class of Jackson Fellows coming through, and it's hugely inspiring to see these people and what their goals are and how they want to make an impact in the world. So that's what gives me hope.
I think the biggest misconception with regards to climate change is that we have to give up something to not, to take that back or reverse it or whatever it is. We do not have to give up anything. In fact, we can gain from that movement. We can gain from making certain changes. And unfortunately, people don't see that. There's just an immediate thinking that I'm going to have to give up my big SUV, or I'm going to have to give up X, Y, and Z. So I'm kind of excited that Elon Musk has taken that on, and some of that stuff that he's showing. I mean, you can still have everything you want, and save yourself from climate change and do your bit.
Go ahead.
I think that's a huge one for the development community as well. It's like you can be an energy efficient building, but you can't be affordable at the same time, which is complete BS. Because if you look at some of the most efficient buildings that are out there are actually affordable housing, and because they see the value in kind of the healthy occupancy, the fact that it saves their tenants a lot of money and energy. But it's weird that other developers don't see that connection.
Yeah, I think for me too, it's been this recognition, especially recently. I think for a long time we thought that technical solutions and the understanding of science in and of itself was going to help get us to a better planet. And we've been saying for years now that 99% of scientists agree that climate change is real, yet that in and of itself has been a necessary but insufficient condition. So I think that's why it's so powerful to be thinking about the cultural change and the art and ways of us mobilizing people and social movements to address it. So I'll do one more question from the audience, which is, what advice would you have for what advice for young environmental activists? Okay, let me read it again here, one more time. Do you have advice for young environmental activists also trying to make a living? Go for it.
I can't speak to the make a living part, but so this is a shameless
that
plug.
was half the question.
Well, okay. Well, I think if
take the first half, I'll take the second.
I think if you follow this advice, the riches will come. So this is a shameless plug for the Jackson Foundation, but here's what I would say. You take the word climate change and have a blank after it and fill in whatever word you want. And fill in the word that you care about most. And that's the issue that you spend a lot of time thinking about and devoting yourself to. So the Jackson Foundation, for instance, is thinking about climate change and national security. You could think about climate change in health. You could think about climate change in the ocean. You could think about climate change in anything. And then go grab one of those Henry M. Jackson books over there and flip to a few pages in and you'll see this list. These are qualities of leadership. And refer to those and just think about them a little bit. And I'll read them to you right now. It's a good leader is inquisitive, visionary, diligent, pragmatic, open, honest, determined, and inspiring. So if you can address that climate change blank and be all those things, you're going to be really successful, and I bet you'll make some money because you'll probably invent something great that will do something terrific for the environment. Matthew, do you have any other wise financial advice?
Yeah, financial. I think honestly, if you're passionate about the environment, there is a ton of opportunity around green jobs, and I think it really depends on how you think about green jobs. Like anything can be a green job. So currently, there's a huge need in the building sector for building engineers. It's like a massively aging population. They're all like gray-haired old white guys, basically. But they're looking for a young talent, kind of out of school. It's a hands-on job, and you're working on the efficiency of the building. You're working to maximize that, and that has a huge impact on the environment. So it kind of depends on how you're thinking about what a green job is. I was super lucky. I think I kind of fell into this whole world. I was really bad at school, like in terms of the learning, and then the regurgitation kind of test thing was not my forte. And as a result, I did not do well in my exams, but I was lucky enough that my university that I applied to was like, hey, sorry you didn't get the grades that you wanted, but how about you try sustainable design and environmental management? And I was like, that sounds pretty cool, I'll give that a go. Turns out I was really good at it. It was like the first thing I've ever done that kind of clicked. Like it was a different way of learning about stuff. And then went into and worked for an architecture firm as a sustainability consultant, just kind of working on energy modeling for stuff. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there. It just kind of creates a little change in how you think about it. I think you can even look at, like, as a teacher, you can be an environmental leader, and it's still a green job, and you're training the youngsters of today. And there are a number of different organizations that are working towards creating those opportunities for living wage jobs and getting more people into green jobs. Check out Got Green. Shameless plug. Got Green. GOTGREEN.
I think the only other advice I would give is, I think you have to find what you love. I mean, for a second, just forget about environment and just find that thing that you just love to do, and then certainly then draw that connection with the environment, because there always is going to be one, and dive deep. The advice that I give people is just focus on what you love and get to the bottom of it. Don't stay in sort of the upper level. Go deep, and when you're the best, right? You will be hired, and you'll be paid for what you know, because nobody else knows it to that level, right? To that depth and the knowledge of it. If you're the one who has that knowledge, then people are going to come to you, and don't do it for free. That's all I say.
So
and
we're gonna
to second that, you gotta work hard. You really gotta work hard.
Yeah, so we're going to do one more question here, and then wrap up, and that is kind of going back to heroes, and I want to ask kind of, why are heroes important? And I'll start with that. And the other hero I was going to bring up of mine is someone named Berta Cáceres, who is a Honduran indigenous leader. Many of you know her, who was assassinated. There's some artwork actually depicting her in the other room, and I think she was very inspiring in terms of standing up to power, bringing movements together, representing indigenous communities in Honduras. I think created a role model for a lot of people. She actually visited Seattle shortly before she was assassinated. So that was who I was going to offer, and I think that someone like that really inspires what it means to kind of try to change the status quo and believe in a world that is much better than the one that we're in today. So why are heroes important?
Mine's pretty simple. I think heroes show us how to be the better people that we strive to become. I think I'm a huge comic book nerd, so this question goes deep for me. Massive Superman fan. I actually, strangely enough, have Superman socks on today. That was not a poignant move. But that's kind of the crux of Superman, right? It's like he is there as a guiding beacon to show people what they should be. And I think you can apply that to your climate hero, whoever they may be. Like, they're a mentor, and they will be there to help you be a better person.
So at any given point, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just truly muddling through this.
What about right now?
Still. I'm really muddling through this and just doing my very best to make change and drive action. And I think most people would agree that they're just as confused as the next person. I think the value of a hero is twofold. They show you what's possible. They show you what can be achieved. And then if you have a really good hero or someone you can at least interact with, they show you how to get there. They show you how to drive change and get to where you need to be. That may not be hero status, but it's, they give you a roadmap there. That's my definition.
To me, it's really simple. Nothing's impossible. That's what a hero teaches me, is you can do it. As much as you might think you can't, there's so many examples of people who've done things that in my books would have been impossible. So that really pushes me to push others, which is what I do all the time. And I'm amazed that it takes time, and you find yourself repeating yourself and saying the same thing over and over again. Just keep doing it, and before you know it, you've gotten you've met your goals, and you've actually achieved something that you never thought you would.
So I want to thank Sarah and the good people at the Impact Hub for having us here, Sarah in the back. I want to thank the wonderful people at Amplifier for organizing this, Tamara, Aaron, everyone else. And then give it up for our panel and for doing awesome work. So thank you all for the discussion.